She was a slave until a human rescued her. Now she's his wife. The collar sparked again. Lyra did not flinch. She had trained herself out of flinching 6 months ago, when the Vorkai overseer had decided that flinching was a form of disrespect. Now she stood still in the cargo bay of the Vorkai transport vessel Keth Dara, her silver-gray hands flat at her sides, her pale eyes fixed on the middle distance, counting her breaths the way her mother had taught her before the raiders took everything worth. 312 days in captivity. She had counted every one. The cargo bay smelled like engine coolant and something older, something that had died in the ventilation system and been forgotten. Around her, 14 other Ithori slaves stood in identical stillness. They had all learned the same lesson. Still, bodies drew less attention. Less attention meant fewer sparks from the collar. The Vorkai were tall, gray-skinned, and operated on a simple economic logic. Everything that could not fight them was property. The Ithori, a slender bioluminescent species from the Saloon system, had not been able to fight them. That had been the end of that conversation. Lyra's collar pulsed once. The overseer was moving through the bay, running his scanner over each captive, tallying values for the upcoming market stop at Drethon Station. She kept her breathing even. Not an engine tremor. Something had hit the hull. The overseer stopped walking. His 2 guards raised their pulse rifles. Every Ithori in the bay went rigid in the specific way that means terror controlled into perfect. The second impact was harder. The lights dropped to emergency red. Then the hull breach alarm screamed, and a section of the cargo bay wall came inward like it had been grabbed and pulled by a very... Through the breach came a man. He was not particularly large by human standards, but he wore a tactical exoframe that made him fill the hole completely, and he moved with the specific economy of someone who had done this before and found it. His helmet visor was dark. His rifle was already up. He put 2 shots into the ceiling above the overseer's head, not to kill, but to establish the terms of the conversation. "Nobody move," he said in Galactic Common. His accent was flat and American and bored. "I'm going to be in and out in 4 minutes. Make it easy." His name was Cole Navarro. He was 31 years old, a contract recovery specialist operating under a Federated Alliance warrant, and he had a moderately impressive bounty record and an absolutely terrible habit of accepting jobs that paid poorly but bothered him morally if he turned them down. This job had been filed by the Ithori Diaspora Council. The pay was bad. The warrant was technically valid in only 6 of the 9 relevant jurisdictions. He had taken it anyway because the briefing file had included photographs, and Cole Navarro had a hard line about certain things. The overseer raised his weapon. Cole shot it out of his hand with the patience of a man swatting a fly, stepped fully into the bay, and looked at the 14 Ithori standing in emergency red light with their collars pulsing. Something in his chest did a complicated thing he did not have time for. "Who speaks common?" he asked. One person raised her hand. Her light was silver blue, a cold, steady glow that did not flicker even though her whole body had to be running on adrenaline. "I do," she said. Her voice was controlled. Her eyes were not. "Tell them I'm here to get them out. Tell them the collars are going to hurt for about 3 seconds when I kill the signal, and then they won't hurt anymore. Can you do that?" She turned and spoke to the others in rapid Ithori, the syllables bright and clicking. Several of the captives exhaled. One made a sound that was not quite crying, but in the neighborhood, Cole pulled the signal disruptor from his belt and looked at her. "Ready?" "Ready," she said. He triggered the device. The collars sparked, screamed, and went dead. In the silence that followed, Cole Navarro had exactly 3 minutes and 40 seconds to get 14 freed captives through a hull breach, across an umbilical line to his ship, and into jump before the Keth Dara's backup systems came online. He looked at the woman who had translated. "You're going to help me move them," he said. It was not a question. Also not a question. Her name was Lyra. She did not tell him that yet. There was no time. The fact of him standing in the red light with his rifle at his side and his voice completely level, like rescuing 14 people from a slaver's hold, was just another Tuesday. 3 minutes and 20 seconds. The umbilical crossing was chaos. 2 of the captives had never been in zero drag before and tumbled. Cole caught one with his free hand, and Lyra caught the other. And they passed them through the breach in the ship's receiving bay like packages. His ship was called the Ardent Grey. It was not beautiful. It was functional in the way that a good boot knife is functional, every part of it shaped by use rather than aesthetics. And when the last Ithori came through the lock and Cole sealed it behind them, the sound of the Keth Dara's alarms cut off completely. 14 people sat or stood or pressed themselves against walls in the receiving bay, their bioluminescence fluctuating in patterns Lyra recognized as shock processing. Cole pulled his helmet off. His face was dark-complexioned, mid-30s wear around the eyes, the kind of jaw that had been clenched too often for too long. He ran a hand through short black hair and looked at the people filling his receiving bay. "Navigation," he said into the ship's comm. "Now." The ardent gray shuddered, stretched, and went. Lyra stood with her back against the wall and watched the human who had come through a hole in a slaver ship and spoken like it was unremarkable. 313 days. She had stopped expecting rescue on day 40. She did not know what came next, because the man now crouching down to check on a shaking Ithori child in the corner of the bay had not once looked at any of them as if they were property. That was something she was going to have to think about. Cole looked up from the child and found Lyra watching him. "You doing okay?" he asked. She had not been asked that question in 313 days. It took her a moment to find an answer that fit. "I am now," she said. He nodded like that was settled and went back to what he was doing. Part 2. The Federated Alliance processing station at Kelmond Outpost was gray and bureaucratic, in exactly the way that places are when nobody with authority has been inside them recently. Cole had been here 11 times in 4 years. He still had to wait 40 minutes every visit, while a different underpaid clerk found his warrant. He waited in the corridor with a cup of something that claimed to be coffee and watched Lyra. Through the transparent partition, she was sitting with the other Ithori in the resettlement intake room. But she was not sitting the way they were sitting. They sat close together, bioluminescence dimmed and synchronized in the Ithori pattern that meant communal comfort-seeking. Lyra sat slightly apart, her light steady and cool, her eyes moving through the room, cataloging exits and personnel with the systematic attention of someone who had decided a long time ago that the only person who was going to keep her safe was, he had a version of it himself. The warrant file was found. The paperwork was signed. He received a payment that was frankly insulting, given that he had punched through a hull. But the Ithori Diaspora Council had been honest about the budget up front, so he had nobody to blame but his own conscience. He was walking back toward the intake room when the problem walked into the station. 2 Vorkai, wearing the blue shoulder insignia of a commercial house rather than the military, and with them a Drethoni legal broker carrying a tablet loaded with what Cole immediately recognized as the documentation posture of someone about to claim property. The Vorkai approached the Alliance desk. The clerk's expression did the specific thing that clerk expressions do when someone with money is explaining something and the clerk does not want to have this conversation, but also does not want to lose their job. Cole put his coffee down on a wall edge and walked to the desk. "Help you?" he said. The broker looked at him with the polished patience of someone accustomed to removing obstacles. "This is not your business, human. We have a legitimate recovery claim on cargo removed from a registered Vorkai vessel." Cole pulled out his warrant card and placed it on the desk. Recovery Specialist, Federated Alliance contract. Those 14 individuals were freed under a valid warrant. The intake process makes them Alliance-registered persons. You want to file a counterclaim. You file it with the regional tribunal on a Neth station, and you wait the standard 18 months. The broker smiled. It was not a warm smile. 18 months is a long time. Things happen to people waiting. Cole looked at him for a moment. "Write that down," he said to the clerk, without looking away from the broker. What he just said. In the incident log. The clerk wrote it down. The broker's smile stopped. The 2 Vorkai were large and had the posture of men accustomed to making that largeness. Cole stood very still with his hands at his sides. The way someone stands when they have already done the math on the situation and found it. "You have no authority here," the broker said. "I have a warrant, a documented incident, and 18 months of process law on my side," Cole said. "You want to start something in a Federated Alliance facility on the record? That's your call." Silence. The specific silence of a calculation being run. The Vorkai and the broker left. Cole picked up his coffee. It had gone cold. He drank it anyway and went to find the intake supervisor to flag the encounter for the official file because he knew from experience that the fight was never actually over, just relocated. He did not go back to the partition to look at Lyra. He told himself it was because he had paperwork to file. Lyra had seen everything through the partition. She had seen the broker arrive, had recognized the documentation posture the same way Cole had because she had been on the receiving end of it 4 times. Had watched her own chest go tight and her light drop and her hands find the edge of her seat. Then Cole had walked to the desk. She watched him stand there, completely still, and take the broker apart with words and a warrant card, and then pick up his coffee like he had simply handled a minor scheduling issue. The Ithori woman sitting nearest to Lyra, whose name was Senna and who had been in captivity 2 years longer, touched Lyra's wrist and said in Aethery, "Is that the human who came through the wall?" "Yes," Lyra said. "He is strange?" "Yes," Lyra said. "Good strange or bad strange?" Lyra watched Cole hand a tablet to a clerk, answer a question, clearly explain something he had already explained twice before with the exact same level of Good strange, she said. I think. The intake processing took 3 days. 11 of the 14 Ithori had family or community contacts in the diaspora network and were routed into resettlement programs. 2 young males had no contacts and chose to apply for Federated Alliance General Resettlement, which would take months. Lyra had no contacts either. The family she'd had before the raiders was gone in ways that did not benefit from description. The diaspora network had a file on her, a name and a species marker and the word missing, but no one on the other end of the file. Looking for her return. A thin Pelhari woman with kind eyes and the manner of someone who delivered bad news often, explained Lyra's options with genuine care. Temporary housing in the station common block while her status was processed. How long? Lyra asked. For full status clearance? 4 to 7 months, standard. 4 to 7 months in a station common block. Shared quarters with 60 other transitional residents. Not a collar, not a cargo bay. She thanked the officer and walked out of the intake wing. Cole was leaning against the wall in the corridor outside, apparently reading something on his comm. How'd it go? General resettlement, she said. 4 to 7 months. He made a face that was not quite a wince. The common block here is okay. Pelhari run it. They're decent. I know, he nodded. Looked back at his comm. I'm running a secondary job. Cargo verification on a Station 3 jumps out. Pays enough to matter. I could use someone who speaks Aethery and Common fluently and is apparently capable of staying calm when things go bad. He paused. You'd have a contract, your own bunk, standard split pay. She looked at him. Because I watched you manage 14 panicked people through a hull breach and 0 drag. And you didn't lose one. She had not thought of it that way. She filed that away too. Temporary contract, she said. Temporary contract, he confirmed. You want to come back here after? I'll bring you back. She thought about 4 to 7 months in a common block, and she thought about a hull breach in red emergency light, and she thought about the specific quality of stillness in a man who does the math and finds it. Good, he said, and pushed off the wall. Ship leaves in 6 hours. The station market is on level 3. He handed her a credit chip without looking at her, as if it were the most normal thing. She looked at the chip in her palm. Nobody had handed her something in 316 days. They had only ever taken. She closed her fingers around it and went to find level 3. Part 3. The ardent gray was cramped in the way that working ships are cramped. Every centimeter assigned a function. Nothing decorative except for a small framed photograph bolted above the navigation console that Lyra did not ask about and Cole did not explain. The bunk he showed her was 6 feet by 3, with a locker, a reading light, and a curtain that actually closed all the way. She had slept in worse places in her own home before the raiders. She had slept in significantly worse since. She put down the single bag she had assembled from the level 3 market, sat on the edge of the bunk, and listened to the ship breathe. Every vessel has a rhythm, the ventilation cycle, the power hum, the occasional structural tick of a hull adjusting to temperature change. Lyra had learned to read ship rhythms in captivity because the rhythms told you things. A change in engine tone meant a course change. A drop in ventilation pressure meant the overseer was doing rounds. Knowledge was armor when nothing else was available. The ardent gray breathed clean and even. The ventilation smelled like recycled air and machine oil and very faint coffee. It breathed like a ship that was maintained by someone who paid attention. She filed that away. The cargo verification job was on Moret Station, a mid-tier trading post in the outer corridor where Alliance oversight was thin and creative. Record-keeping was a local tradition. Cole had a client, a Pelhari shipping house with a legitimate cargo concern, and the job was to walk a manifest and confirm what was in the hold was what the documentation said was in the hold, because the previous verifier had found a reason to look the other way and the shipping house needed someone they could trust not to. Cole explained this in a flat, factual way over a meal of packaged protein and reconstituted grain at the galley table 3 hours into the jump. You're looking for documentation mismatch, he said. Species goods, organic materials, anything listed as industrial but with no plausible industrial use. You've been in transit trade. You know what the mismatch patterns look like. I know what they look like from the inside, He looked at her directly. That's more useful, not less, she ate. The photograph above the console, she said. My sister, he said. I just like having something from home. Lyra processed this. You miss home? Sure, but you don't go back. I go back? He paused. Not often. She understood the texture of that. Some places were home in the way that a wound is home to scar tissue. You carried it everywhere. You didn't need to keep returning to it to know it was there. She did not say that, Marit Station was populated by the specific category of person who has found ways to make legal and illegal mean roughly the same thing at the right price point. The docking bay smelled like rust and burned fuel. Cole moved through it with the comfort of familiarity, nodded at two separate people who nodded back with the wariness of people who had found him. The shipping house contact was a Pelhari named Osen, wire-thin, perpetually stressed, who shook Cole's hand and then looked at Lyra with visible recalibration. "She's the verifier?" Osen said. "She is," Cole said. "She looks like someone who knows what she's doing," Cole said, with the tone of a conversation being ended. Osen recalibrated further and handed Lyra the manifest tablet. The cargo hold was large, cold, and stacked with containers in 6 categories per the documentation. Lyra walked the manifest with Cole one step behind her, and she did what she had learned to do in captivity. She looked at the thing behind the thing, sense for what it claimed to contain. It took her 90 minutes. "Rows 7 through 12, she said to Cole. "Listed as agricultural processing equipment. The ventilation routing includes passive humidity regulation. Agricultural equipment doesn't need humidity regulation. Organic cargo does." Cole looked at the rows. Looked at the manifest. "You got that from ventilation routing." "I spent 8 months in a cargo hold," she said. "You learned the tells." The tells, when they opened containers 7 through 12, were worse than irregular ventilation. The containers held personal effects, the kinds of things people pack when they expect to arrive somewhere and need what they own. Their owners were not in the containers. Their owners had been separated from these items during transit. Lyra knew exactly what that meant and when it happened and why. She stood in the cold hold, and her light went flat, the bioluminescence draining to the dull white that in Athori means the body is redirecting. Cole was already on his comm to Osen, his voice doing the flat, bored thing that she now understood meant he was angry in the specific controlled way that operated as a tool. "You have a problem," he told Osen. "I don't know anything about..." "I documented the ventilation routing, the sealware, and the container contents 12 minutes ago, and it's already filed with the Alliance Regional. You want to explain to me what your company knows about where the people who owned this cargo are? Right now?" Silence on the comm. "No," Cole continued, "is not an acceptable answer. Try again." Lyra set the manifest tablet down on top of container 7. She breathed through the flat feeling, the familiar weight of it, the knowledge of what these containers meant sitting in her chest like a stone she had to carry. Carefully so it didn't shift and break something. She had carried it for a year. Cole finished the call. Read her face or her light or something else entirely and did not say anything immediately, which was the right response. "The shipping house had a contractor they didn't fully vet," he said. "Osen claims he didn't know. That may even be true." "Where are they?" she said. "The Alliance Regional Office is pulling transit logs. They have a chain to follow." He paused. "It might lead somewhere good. It might not." "It might not," he agreed. She picked the tablet back up because her hands needed something to do. "You filed it before you confronted Osen," she said, "so he couldn't destroy anything." "Yeah. You've done this before. A few times." He said it, the way he said most things, flat and factual, with no invitation to admire it. Just a thing that was true. Her light began to come back, the silver blue returning slowly from the flat white, the way it always did when the stone settled and she found her balance around it. She handed him the tablet. "What else do you need from me today?" she said. He took the tablet and looked at her in the way he had looked at her in the red emergency light on. The Keth Dara, the look that was not pity and not admiration, but something more like acknowledgement, the recognition of a person who was still standing. "Nothing else today," he said. "You did good work?" They walked out of the cold hole together, and the Merit Station corridor was loud and smelled like rust and burned fuel, and Lyra walked through it next to the human who had come through a wall and filed the documentation before the confrontation, and thought that the stone in her chest was the same weight it had always been. Part 4. 6 weeks into the temporary contract, the Vorkai found them at Pelmos Refueling Depot. 3 ships, Vorkai Commercial Registry, sitting on the far side of the depot when Cole brought the Ardent Grey in for a fuel stop. The arrangement had the look of a thing set up in advance, which meant someone had been tracking them, which meant the Kelmund confrontation had escalated to a level Cole had hoped it wouldn't reach, for at least another month. He sat in the pilot seat and looked at the sensor readout and said a word Lyra had already learned. Was his version of loud alarm delivered quietly. "We can refuel and move. They may not want to do anything in a depot with Alliance registration. Or they want to do something in a depot with Alliance registration." She looked at the 3 ships, thought about 313 days, about container 7 through 12, about the broker's documentation posture and the specific weight of a thing that follows you. "They're not going to stop," she said. Not because of jurisdiction. No, he agreed. Probably not. Then we don't handle this at depots. He looked at her. We file an escalation with the Federated Alliance Enforcement Division, she said. We give them the Kelmund incident, the broker's recorded statement, the tracking pattern. We make it an official record of coordinated harassment by a registered Vorkai commercial house. That changes what they can do without consequences. Cole was quiet for a moment. That's a 6 to 8 week process before FAED does anything active. Yes. His jaw did the clenching thing. You want to refuel under their noses and then go file paperwork. I want to refuel, complete our current job, return to Kelmund, and file paperwork with every piece of documentation we have, which is substantial, she said. And then I want to do the next job, and the one after that, until the clock runs out in our favor. They could try something before the clock runs. Out. Yes. She did not look away from him. But you came through a wall on a moving ship, and they still had all the structural advantages. I think we manage. Something in his face shifted. Not a smile, exactly. Something more interior than that. We refuel. He took the ship in. The Vorkai vessels did not move. Cole paid for the fuel with a transaction timestamp that entered 3 Alliance registries. Automatically, because he was the kind of person who had learned to make paper trails as naturally, as breathing, and Lyra stood at the cargo bay port and watched the Vorkai ships and thought about the difference between a collar and a clock. A collar was immediate. It controlled the present moment through pain. It was effective precisely because it did not require patience. A clock was the opposite. A clock required the other side to have patience, and in her experience, the kind of people who used collars did not have it. They were built for the immediate and the overwhelming. They did not know how to wait for a bureaucratic process to work against them, because bureaucratic processes had never worked against them. They did not know about Cole Navarro and his extraordinary instinct for paperwork. She almost wanted to tell them. The Ardent Grey departed. The Vorkai ships did not follow into the depot's no-pursuit zone. Cole filed the first documentation package from Jump, with Lyra sitting across the galley table cross-referencing dates and incident numbers, and it turned out she was very good at documentation. You're very good at this, he said, after she caught a 3-week gape in the incident timeline that would have been a weakness in the... I had to track everything, she said. Schedules, patterns, who paid attention to what and when. If you tracked it, you could sometimes predict it. Prediction was the only form of control available. He was quiet for a moment. What did you do before? Before the Raiders. She had not spoken about before in over a year. The authority counselors at Kelmund had tried, gently, and she had given them the minimum and kept the rest. She looked at the documentation on the screen. I mapped transit routes in the saloon corridor. Hazard surveys, jump point calibration. She paused. I was good at it. That's... He stopped. Professionally? I know. She looked at him. Is that what you're thinking about? I'm thinking about more than one thing at the same time. I usually do. She filed that away. The man who usually thought about more than one thing at the same time. She was learning the shape of him the way she had learned the shape of the Ardent Greys, because understanding a thing was the first step toward not being surprised by it. The FAED filing went in on a Wednesday. On Thursday, they completed the secondary cargo job and returned to Kelmund to file the original. Ithori rescue paperwork properly, which Cole had been navigating for 6 weeks. The caseworker, the same thin Pelhari woman with kind eyes, looked at the documentation package Cole laid on her desk with visible appreciation. This is the most complete filing I've seen in 3 years, she said. She did most of the organization, Cole said, tilting his head at Lyra. The caseworker looked at Lyra with a slightly different expression than before. We may need a formal statement from you for the FAED escalation. I know, Lyra said. I'll give it. They had lunch afterward at the station's only decent food kiosk, reconstituted Terran noodles with something that approximated a broth, and sat at a table by the viewport looking out at the docking bay. You don't have to come back from this job, Cole said. Unless righty, your temporary contract covers the merit run and the return. You've more than fulfilled it. If you want the resettlement track, your FAED statement alone will accelerate your status. She thought about the common block and the 4 to 7 months and the 60 transitional residents. She thought about level 3 of the station market and a credit chip placed in her hand without. And if I want to extend the contract, she said. He wrapped both hands around his cup. Then I write you a new one. What would it look like? Navigator analyst. The cartography background makes you qualified for route surveys I've been turning down because I don't have the right equipment or crew. It's better pay. He paused. Separate bunk stays the same. Your call on any job. I don't take work you can't live with. She looked at the noodles. Looked at the docking bay. You've been thinking about this for a while, she said. I've been thinking about more than one thing at the same time, he said. She looked at him. He was looking out at the docking bay, and the afternoon light in the station's simulated cycle was falling on the side of his face, and he was doing the thing where his jaw was slightly clenched because he was thinking and waiting. All right, what? New contract, she said. Alliance registered. He looked at her. Like it was settled? She ate her reconstituted noodles and thought that the stone in her chest had not gone away. She had stopped counting on things after day 40. She was reconsidering that policy. Part 5, 8 months later. The FAED case closed with the seizure of 3 Vorkai commercial vessels, the dissolution of the Keth Dara's operating license, and the referral of the broker from Kelmund to the Galactic Commerce Tribunal on 12 counts of documented harassment and 1 count of coordinated transit fraud. Cole read the notification on his comm over breakfast and showed it to Lyra without saying, "Put the comm down." Picked up her coffee. "That's it?" he said. "What else is there to say?" He thought about it. "Probably nothing," he agreed. They were at Merritt Station again, the 3rd visit in 8 months, and it smelled exactly the same as the first time, except that Lyra had stopped noticing the rust and fuel smell, which meant it had become familiar, which was a thing she thought about. The Ardent Grey had a new piece of equipment in the navigation bay. A route survey array, Alliance certified, the kind used for hazard mapping and jump point calibration in unmapped corridor sectors. Cole had sourced it 3 months in, after their first route survey contract came in from a Pelhari exploration company that had seen Lyra's credentials in the Alliance registry and made contact. She had spent 2 weeks in the navigation bay calibrating it and felt, for the first time in almost 2 years, that her hands were doing something they remembered how to do. The work had been good. They had surveyed 6 jump corridors in the outer reach, 2 of which had yielded hazard data that got flagged immediately for transit alerts and earned them a citation from the Alliance Navigation Authority, which Cole had printed and taped to the wall next to the photograph of his sister. Lyra had found that unreasonably satisfying. The current job was a follow-on survey in the Merritt Corridor extension. 3 weeks, good pay, straightforward by their standards. They would pick up the survey equipment calibration kit from a local vendor, file the job start, and depart by evening. Cole was doing the job filing on his comm. Lyra was watching the docking bay and thinking. She had been thinking about the same thing for approximately 6 weeks and had not said it because she was not certain how to. This was unusual. She had become, in 8 months aboard the Ardent Grey, a person who said what she thought and found it received without drama. Cole Navarro was not a complicated man in the ways that mattered. He meant what he said, and said what he meant, and did not expect performance. She had forgotten what that was like. She had been thinking for 6 weeks about the difference between a temporary arrangement and a permanent one, and about the fact that she had stopped thinking of the Ardent Grey as a ship she worked on and started thinking of it as the place she lived, and about the photograph above the navigation console and the fact that Cole had, 3 weeks ago, without comment, added a second photograph beside it. It was a survey image. The second hazard corridor, the one with the collapsed jump point cluster that had earned the navigation citation. He had printed it on glossy stock and bolted it to the bulkhead at the same height as his sister and the 3 dogs. She had not said anything about it. She was thinking about it now. "Yeah," he said without looking up from the comm. "I want to talk about the contract." He put the comm down, gave her his full attention in the way he did, completely, no half-presence. "You want to renegotiate the terms," he said. "I want to talk about what comes after the contract," she said. "Okay," he said carefully. "I have been on this ship for 8 months," she said. "I have a Federated Alliance Navigator Analyst registration. I have a citation from the Navigation Authority. I have a formal statement in an FAED case that helped close 3 Vorkai vessels. I have a bunk with a curtain that closes all the way." She looked at him. "I have not wanted to be anywhere else in 8 months." The jaw unclenched slightly. "I'm not saying this to make things complicated," she said. "I'm saying it because I know how to track patterns, and I trust what the pattern says." He was quiet for a long time. Outside, the docking bay moved through its ordinary noise, ships and cargo and people going places. "The pattern," he said. "You put my survey image on the wall?" she said. He looked at the table, a small thing that was almost a smile. "I did," he said. "You did not explain it." "No." "You do not explain things you think are self-evident," she said. He looked up at her. "I don't." She held his gaze. Bioluminescence was not something she had ever been self-conscious about. It was simply how Ithori physiology worked, the light responding to internal states, uncontrollable and specific as a heartbeat. Right now, it was doing something she had not seen it do in 2 years. The silver blue had gone to something closer to gold. His expression did the complicated thing it sometimes did when he noticed something and chose not to look away from it. I am not going to pretend to know exactly what this is, she said. I was not in a position to want things for a long time. I am learning how again. I know, he said quietly, but I know what I don't want. I don't want to be somewhere else. I don't want to work for someone else. I don't want to eat reconstituted noodles across from someone else. She paused. That's the honest version. He was quiet for a moment. The honest version is good, he said. He reached across the table and put his hand on the table between them, not on her hand, just near it, in the deliberate, careful way of someone who had also learned about not surprising. She put her hand on his. Neither of them said anything for a while. The docking bay noise continued outside. The ardent gray breathed its clean, even rhythm. The next job's 3 weeks, he said finally. I know. After that, I have a standing survey offer in the Belhari corridor. It's better than anything we've run. I saw it in the queue, she said. I was going to ask if you wanted to take it. Yes, she said. He looked at their hands. I don't know how to do this particular thing, he said. I should tell you that. Neither do I, she said. I'm learning. Okay. He said it the way he said most important things, like it was settled and reasonable and just the next step in the sequence. Then we learn. She thought about 313 days and the emergency red light, and a man who came through a wall like it was unremarkable. She thought about a credit chip placed in a palm without ceremony, and a bunk with a curtain, and a survey image on a bulkhead next to 3 dogs. She thought about the stone in her chest, which was still there, which would probably always be there, which was simply the weight of what had happened and could not be undone. It was manageable now. We leave by evening? She said. She finished her coffee. He picked up his comm and finished the job filing. Outside, the station turned through its cycles, and the ardent gray sat at the dock, waiting. The way a home waits. Cole Navarro had a moderately impressive bounty record and a terrible habit of taking jobs that paid poorly but bothered him morally if he turned them down. He did not think of Lyra as something he had rescued. He thought of her as the person who had told him to file the documentation first and confront Osen, second, who had found a 3-week gap in illegal filing at midnight, who had surveyed 6 hazard corridors with her hands doing something they remembered, who had said the honest version is good and meant it. He thought of her as the person sitting across the table with her hand on his, with her light gone warm gold in a way she had not seemed to notice. He did not say it. Some things were self-evident. The ardent gray departed Merritt Station at evening, heading for the survey corridor, carrying 2 people who were both still learning how to want things, which is not the easiest way to begin something, but is perhaps the most honest one.